The stars bent and twisted as the massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Kestra Chen felt the familiar lurch in her stomach as reality snapped back into place around them. Through the wide windows of the command bridge, space looked normal again, black emptiness dotted with distant suns. But her sensors told a different story. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Torres from his station. "We're reading the Sol system. Distance, 2 light hours and closing." Kestra nodded, her dark eyes fixed on the main display screen. After 30,000 years, humanity had finally come home, or what was left of it. The Remembrance led a fleet of over 300 ships. Some were massive arc vessels, each one home to millions of humans. Others were sleek warships built in the deep void between stars. All of them carried the children and grandchildren of Earth's refugees, people who had never seen their homeworld but carried its memory in their genes. "Begin long-range scans," Kestra ordered. Her voice was calm, but her hands gripped the chair arms tightly. "I want to know what happened here." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of computers. Around her, dozens of crew members worked, at their stations. Most looked human, but 300 centuries of travel had changed them. Some were taller and thinner from growing up on low-gravity ships. Others had pale skin from lives spent in artificial light. A few showed subtle changes from contact with friendly alien species, better eyes, stronger bones, enhanced minds, but they were all human. They all remembered Earth, even if they had never walked on real soil or breathed natural air. "Admiral," Torres's voice was tight with shock. "You need to see this!" The main screen changed, showing what their sensors had found in Earth's orbit. Kestra's breath caught in her throat. There was no Earth. Where the blue and green world should have been, there was only an asteroid field. Chunks of rock and metal tumbled slowly around the sun, some still glowing with deadly radiation. The debris, fields stretched for millions of miles, a grave marker for 12 billion dead. "My God," whispered someone behind her. Kestra had prepared for this moment her entire life. The fleet's historians had warned them that Earth might be gone. But seeing, it was different than knowing it could happen. "Run deep scans on the debris," she said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "Look for any trace of what did this." As her crew worked, Kestra thought about the stories passed down through 300 centuries. She remembered her grandmother's words spoken when Kestra was just a child. They came from the stars like angels, but they were devils. They said Earth was in their way. They gave us 6 months to leave, 6 months to abandon our homeworld forever. The first contact had happened so fast. Humanity had barely reached Mars when the aliens arrived. They called themselves the hegemony of Kethvar, and they spoke to Earth's leaders like adults talking to children. Earth had resources they needed: rare metals, clean water, a perfect location for a supply base. The fact that billions of people lived there was just an inconvenience. "We will allow your species to relocate," the Kethvar had said in their cold electronic voices. "Choose wisely." Some world leaders had tried to fight. Their armies and missiles meant nothing to ships that could cross between stars. Others had begged for more time. The Kethvar gave them exactly what they promised. 6 months, no more, no less. The evacuation ships had been humanity's greatest achievement and deepest shame. Working around the clock, they managed to build vessels that could carry 200 million people to safety. But Earth held 12 billion souls. For every person who escaped, 50 had to be left behind. Kestra's own ancestor, Dr. Maria Chen, had been on the last ship to leave Earth's atmosphere. The family stories said she spent her final minutes on Earth helping load children onto the escape pods, making sure the future of humanity would survive even if she couldn't. "Admiral," Torres called again, "we're picking up energy signatures, old ones but definitely artificial." "Show me." The screen split, showing readings from across the solar system. Mars was gone, stripped down to its iron core. The asteroid belt had been mined completely. Jupiter's moons were hollow shells, sucked dry of their ice and minerals. But there were traces, faint energy readings that spoke of massive industrial operations. "They strip-mined everything," Dr. Sarah Kim said from the science station. She was the fleet's head xenobiologist, a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. This wasn't war, Admiral. This was resource extraction. They treated our solar system like a quarry. Kestra felt anger burning in her chest, but she kept it controlled. Anger was useful, but only if you didn't let it make you stupid. Any sign of where they went? Working on it. The energy signatures form patterns, almost like shipping routes. Give me a few hours, and I can probably track their destination. Do it. Kestra stood up, her tall frame casting shadows across the bridge. In the meantime, I want every piece of debris analyzed. Anything that might have come from Earth originally. Anything that proves our people lived here. As her crew bent to their work, Kestra walked to the observation deck. The Remembrance was more than just a warship. It was a city in space with gardens and schools and homes for 3 million people. Children ran through the corridors, their laughter echoing off metal walls. They played games and learned stories and dreamed about planets they'd never seen. Soon, those children would learn that Earth was truly gone, but they would also learn something else. The fleet had not spent 30,000 years running away. They had spent it growing stronger. In the deep places between stars, humanity had met other species. Most were peaceful, and from them, humans, had learned new sciences, new philosophies, new ways of seeing the universe. They had shared knowledge and culture, building friendships that stretched across the galaxy, but they had also met other refugees. Species that had been driven from their homeworlds by the same casual cruelty that destroyed Earth. From them, humanity had learned something else entirely. They had learned how to fight. Admiral, Dr. Kim's voice came over the ship's communication system. I found them. I know where the HFY went after they finished here. Kestra smiled, and it was not a gentle expression. Plot a course, Doctor. It's time our old friends learned that humanity never forgot what they did to us. Behind her, the ruins of Earth tumbled in the darkness. But ahead of them, 300 ships full of humans began turning toward a new destination. The children of Earth were going hunting, and they had all the time in the universe to get it right. The hyperspace journey took 3 weeks, but Admiral Kestra Chen used every day to prepare. The human fleet followed the energy trail left by the HFY ships, tracking them across hundreds of light years like bloodhounds following a scent. When they finally dropped back into normal space, they found themselves at the edge of a dead solar system. Jesus Christ, Lieutenant Torres whispered, staring at his sensors. 6 planets orbited a dying red star. Every single world had been hollowed out, their surfaces cracked open like broken eggs. Massive mining equipment still floated in space around them, abandoned and dark. The HFY had moved on decades ago, leaving behind only industrial waste and empty shells. But this time, humanity wasn't alone. Admiral, called Communications Officer Park. We're receiving a transmission. It's human. Kestra's heart jumped. On screen, the main display flickered, then showed a woman's face. She was clearly human, but different. Her skin was pale blue-white, and her eyes were larger than normal. Strange markings covered her cheeks and forehead. I am Captain Yuki Sato of the refugee ship New Kyoto, the woman said. Her accent was Old Earth Japanese mixed with something else entirely. We've been monitoring your fleet. Are you from the Terran evacuation? Yes, Kestra said, stepping forward. I'm Admiral Chen of the Remembrance, Captain Sato. We thought we were the only survivors. The woman smiled and tears ran down her blue-tinged cheeks. Admiral, you're not alone. There are dozens of human refugee fleets scattered across this part of the galaxy. We've all been following the same trail. Over the next few hours, Kestra learned the truth about humanity's diaspora. When Earth fell, the evacuation ships had scattered in different directions. Some, like her own fleet, had wandered the deep space between stars. Others had found homes on distant worlds, adapting to alien environments over centuries. Captain, Sato's people had lived on a water world for 15,000 years, changing slowly to breathe the thick, humid air. Another fleet had made their home in zero gravity, growing tall and thin as they lived their entire lives in space. A third group had merged partially with a friendly silicon-based species, gaining longer lives and enhanced memories. But they all remembered Earth, and they had all been following the HFY. "We call it the Trail of Tears," explained Commander Joachim Webb, leader of another refugee group. His people had lived on a high-gravity world, making them shorter but incredibly strong. Everywhere the Kethvar go, they leave the same destruction. Dead worlds, empty space, broken civilizations. The human fleets gathered in the hollow system, sharing information they had collected over millennia. The picture they painted made Kestra's blood run cold. The Kethvar hegemony wasn't just an empire, it was a plague that consumed everything in its path. They had destroyed over 400 civilizations in the past 30,000 years, strip mining entire regions of the galaxy. Their territory now covered millions of star systems, ruled by fear and maintained by slave armies built from the survivors of conquered worlds. "They don't even see us as people," said Dr. Elena Vasquez from the New Brasilia. "To them, we're just another resource to be harvested or disposed of." But the refugees had found something else during their travels. Other survivors. Hidden in the dark spaces between Kethvar systems, whole communities of displaced species lived in secret. They called themselves the Forgotten, and they had been waiting for someone to unite them. "How many?" Kestra asked. "Billions," Captain Sato said quietly. "Maybe trillions. Every species the Kethvar thought they had wiped out. They survive in asteroid bases, rogue planets, deep space habitats. They're scattered, afraid and angry, but they remember what was taken from them." Kestra felt something stirring in her chest. Not just anger now, but hope. "Can we contact them?" "We already have," Commander Webb said with a grim smile. "Admiral, you're not just looking at the human refugee fleets. You're looking at the beginning of an alliance that spans half the galaxy." Over the following days, ships began arriving from the darkness. First came the Zephyrians, a bird-like species whose homeworld had been strip-mined 2,000 years ago. Their ships were beautiful, organic curves that moved like living creatures through space. Then came the Stone Singers, heavy-gravity beings who looked like walking boulders. The Kethvar had enslaved their people for 8,000 years before. They escaped. They brought massive cargo ships full of weapons and armor. The Voidwalkers arrived next, energy beings who had learned to live in the empty space between stars. The Kethvar couldn't even see them properly, which made them perfect spies and messengers. Each species brought the same story: casual destruction, industrial-scale genocide, and the complete dismissal of their right to exist. But they also brought something else. They brought knowledge. "The Kethvar have 3 core worlds," explained Thrix, the Zephyrian fleet leader. Her translated voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Kethvar Prime, the military center, Dominion, where they keep their slave armies, and the Arsenal, where they build their war machines." "How well defended?" Kestra asked. "Perfectly," said Granite, who remembers, speaking for the Stone Singers. His words came out like grinding rocks. "Each world has planetary shields that can stop any weapon we know of, billions of automated defense platforms, and the slave armies, they don't fight by choice, but they fight very well." Kestra studied the tactical displays, her mind racing. A direct attack would be suicide, even with all the refugee fleets combined. The Kethvar had spent 30 millennia building their empire. They had every advantage: better weapons, more ships, fortified positions. But they had one weakness. "They rule through fear," she said slowly. "Their entire empire depends on keeping their slaves obedient and their enemies scattered." "Yes," hissed Whisper in Dark, the Voidwalker representative. Its form was barely visible, like looking at smoke in starlight. "They have grown confident, arrogant. They believe no one can challenge them." Kestra smiled, and the other species leaders leaned back slightly. There was something predatory in that smile, something that reminded them that humans had spent 30,000 years learning from the universe's deadliest species. "Then it's time they learned how wrong they are," she said. "But we're not going to attack their core worlds. Not yet." "What do you propose?" asked Captain Sato. "We're going to wake up every enslaved species in their empire, all at once, and then we're going to teach them how to fight back." The meeting fell silent. It was an audacious plan, impossible by any reasonable measure. The Kethvar Empire spanned thousands of worlds. Coordinating a galaxy-wide revolution would require perfect timing, incredible resources, and more luck than anyone had a right to expect. It will take years to prepare, Commander Webb said finally. We have time, Kestra replied. The Kethvar think they've won. They think the galaxy belongs to them. Let them keep thinking that while we teach every slave species in their empire that freedom is possible. Thrix's feathers rustled with what might have been excitement. When do we begin? Kestra looked around at the assembled leaders. Humans, changed by exile, aliens united by loss, all of them refugees who had refused to give up hope. We already have, she said. Send word to every hidden colony, every secret base, every group of survivors. Tell them the children of the destroyed worlds are finally ready to come home. In the darkness around them, hundreds of ships waited. Soon, they would scatter across the galaxy, carrying a message that the Kethvar hegemony had tried to destroy 30,000 years ago. The message was simple. You are not alone, and you do not have to be afraid forever. The galaxy was about to remember what freedom looked like. Marcus Rivera floated in the maintenance shaft, his enhanced eyes studying the Kethvar security system. After 18 months of preparation, the revolution was finally beginning. He was just one of thousands of human operatives who had infiltrated Kethvar space. But right now, he was the most important person on Sigma Tertius. The slave world below him held 40 million Kalani, a reptilian species that had been conquered 600 years ago. They worked in the crystal mines, harvesting rare minerals that powered Kethvar weapons. Most had never seen the surface of their own planet. Marcus had been on Sigma Tertius for 3 weeks, posing as a maintenance worker. His modified genetics let him look like almost any humanoid species, while nanobots in his bloodstream made him invisible to most sensors. The Kethvar had grown lazy after centuries of easy rule. They never imagined that someone could slip past their defenses so easily. But Marcus hadn't come to sabotage the mines or steal information. He had come to teach. Contact established, he whispered into his communicator. Far above him, the human fleet was too distant to detect, but they could still receive his messages through quantum relays hidden in asteroids. In the slave quarters, below, Marcus had made contact with Sisk Ka, an old Kalani who remembered stories from before the conquest. Like many beings whose worlds had been destroyed, Sisk Ka carried the oral history of his people in his memory. He knew about the time when Kalani had ruled their own fate. Marcus dropped through a ventilation grate into the darkened quarters. Hundreds of Kalani were sleeping on metal shelves, their scales dulled from years of malnutrition and despair. But in a corner alcove, 30 of them waited for him. You came, Sisk Ka said in his hissing voice. His yellow eyes were bright with hope and fear. I promised I would, Marcus said. He activated a small device, and holographic images filled the air around them. These are pictures of your homeworld. Before the Kethvar came, your great-grandfather would have seen cities like these. The Kalani stared at the images with wonder. Most had been born in the mines and had never seen their own planet's surface. The holograms showed gleaming cities, vast forests, and Kalani flying through the air on natural gliding membranes that their ancestors had possessed. We were mighty once, whispered Hesna, a younger female whose scales still showed hints of the brilliant colors her people once displayed. You still are, Marcus said. The Kethvar want you to forget that, but strength doesn't disappear. It just gets buried under fear. He showed them more images. Other worlds where slave revolts had succeeded. Species that had thrown off Kethvar rule and reclaimed their freedom. Most of the stories were true, though Marcus edited them carefully. The Kalani didn't need to know how many of those revolts had failed before the survivors learned the right tactics. The overseers have weapons, Sisk Ka said. The guard towers have energy shields. How can we fight with mining tools and hope? Marcus smiled and opened his equipment pack. Inside were devices that looked like simple mining equipment, but had been redesigned by human engineers. Every tool can be a weapon if you know how to use it, and every Kethvar system has weaknesses if you know where to look. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus taught them the basics: how to turn mining charges into explosives, how to override security locks with tools they already had access to, how to coordinate attacks using the mine's own communication systems. But most importantly, He taught them about timing. The revolution happens everywhere at once, he explained. In 47 days, at exactly 0800 Standard Galactic Time, every slave world in this sector will rise up together. The Kethvar can handle one rebellion, maybe even 10, but they can't handle 100 at the same time. Similar scenes were playing out on worlds across the galaxy. Human operatives, each one trained in exactly what that specific situation needed, were making contact with enslaved species and forgotten refugees. Some brought weapons, others brought technical knowledge. A few brought nothing but stories, reminders, that freedom was possible. On Talos 9, Lieutenant Sarah Kim was teaching the insectoid hive builders how to turn their own tunneling instincts into military advantages. The Kethvar had forced them to dig tunnels for underground factories, never realizing they were creating the perfect network for guerrilla warfare. In the asteroid mines of Kepler Station, Commander Chen Wei was showing the crystalline resonance, how to use their natural harmonic abilities to shatter Kethvar equipment. Their captors had been using their sonic gifts to locate valuable minerals, not knowing that the same frequencies could bring down entire buildings. And in the slave ships of the Outer Rim, Captain Lisa Park was smuggling weapons to the Nomads, a species that had been turned into living cargo haulers. The Kethvar thought they were too broken to fight, but humans had learned something important during their own exile. Sometimes the best fighters were the ones who had lost everything. Each operation was different, tailored to the specific species and situation. But they all shared the same goal: wake up the galaxy's enslaved peoples and remind them that they outnumbered their oppressors by billions to one. The Kethvar were beginning to notice problems, but they interpreted them wrong. When mining equipment started breaking down more often, they blamed poor maintenance. When slave workers became less efficient, they increased punishments. When communication systems developed mysterious glitches, they ordered technicians to fix them. They never suspected that the galaxy's scattered refugees had spent 30,000 years learning how to be invisible. Marcus completed his training session with the Kalani and prepared to move on. In 2 days, he would be on another world, teaching another enslaved species how to remember their strength. But before he left, Sisk-Ka caught his arm. "Human," the old Kalani said, "why do you help us? Your people suffered too. You could have stayed hidden, stayed safe." Marcus thought about Earth, the blue world he had never seen but carried in his genetic memory. He thought about 12 billion humans who had died because they were inconvenient to someone else's plans. "Because we learned something during our exile," he said. "We learned that freedom isn't something you can hoard. You can only keep it by helping others find it too." Back on the Remembrance, Admiral Chen watched reports coming in from across the galaxy. Human operatives had made contact with enslaved species on over 300 worlds. The network was growing, spreading through the dark spaces between Kethvar, systems like wildfire, but the most important contacts weren't with slaves. They were with the Kethvar themselves. Not all members of the hegemony were conquerors. Many were species that had been absorbed into their empire through politics rather than force. They had enjoyed the benefits of Kethvar rule for centuries, but some still remembered what it felt like to be free. "Admiral," Dr. Kim reported from the intelligence station, "we've received confirmation from Agent Torres. The Vorthak Consortium is willing to meet with us." The Vorthak were one of the founding species of the Kethvar hegemony, but they had grown tired of constant warfare. Their homeworld was overcrowded and polluted from centuries of military industry. Many of their young people were beginning to question why they needed an empire that brought them nothing but enemies. "Set up the meeting," Chen ordered, "but keep it quiet. If the other hegemony members learn that the Vorthak are talking to us..." "Understood, Admiral." Chen turned back to the tactical display, watching as tiny lights marked successful contacts across the galaxy. Each light represented millions of beings who were learning that they didn't have to be afraid forever. In 46 days, those lights would all flare at once, and the Kethvar hegemony, which had ruled through fear for 30 millennia, was about to learn what terror really meant. But first they had to make sure everyone was ready. The revolution would only work if every world rose up at exactly the same moment. Too early, and the Kethvar could crush them one by one. Too late, and the advantage of surprise would be lost. The children of destroyed worlds had learned patience. During their long exile, Now they would need every bit of it because the hardest part wasn't starting the revolution. It was making sure everyone survived what came next. The revolution began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, and it began everywhere at once. On Sigma Tertius, Sisk-Ka led his people out of the crystal mines just as the morning shift began. The Kethvar overseers expected another day of quiet, submission. Instead, they found 40 million Kalani who had remembered how to be angry. Admiral Chen watched it all from the Bridge of the Remembrance, her fleet hidden in the space between star systems. Holographic displays showed the galaxy. In real time and everywhere she looked, lights were turning from red to green as slave worlds threw off their chains. "Status report," she ordered. "Sigma Tertius is free," Lieutenant Torres called out. "The Kalani control all mining facilities and have destroyed the orbital defense platforms." "Talos 9 reports success," added Communications Officer Park. "The EAA hive builders have collapsed every Kethvar structure on the planet. Their tunnel network worked perfectly." "Kepler Station is ours," Dr. Kim announced. "The resonance shattered the asteroid processing equipment and captured 3 Kethvar cruisers." Report after report flooded in. In the first 6 hours, over 200 worlds declared their freedom. The plan was working even better than Chen had hoped, but she knew the easy part was over. The Kethvar response was swift and brutal. High Admiral Vexthar stood in the command center of the battle station Dominion, watching his empire burn. Red. Warning lights covered every display as reports of rebellion came in from across the galaxy. His forearms moved frantically over control surfaces while his compound eyes tried to process the scope of the disaster. "This is impossible," he hissed in the clicking language of his species. "Simultaneous uprisings on 300 worlds? Someone is coordinating this." "The humans, High Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, a pale, insectoid creature, whose species had served the hegemony for 8,000 years. "Our agents report seeing human operatives on at least 50 worlds before the rebellions began." Vexathar's mandibles clicked with rage. "Humans. Those primitives were exterminated 30 millennia ago. We strip-mined their entire system." "Apparently not all of them, sir. Intelligence suggests large human populations escaped before Earth's destruction. They've been hiding in deep space, growing stronger." The High Admiral studied the tactical displays. The rebellions weren't random. They formed a pattern that cut his empire in half. Kethvar military units were scattered across hundreds of systems, trying to contain uprisings that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Send the message to all fleet commanders," he ordered. "Purge protocols are now in effect. Any world that cannot be immediately pacified is to be sterilized from orbit." It was the response Chen had expected, and the one she had prepared for. As Kethvar battle fleets moved toward rebellious worlds, they found obstacles they hadn't anticipated. Asteroid fields that should have been empty suddenly erupted with hidden weapons platforms. Supply convoys disappeared in hyperspace, their cargo holds stripped clean by ships that vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The human fleets had spent months positioning themselves throughout Kethvar space, invisible and patient. Now they struck with precision that took the hegemony completely by surprise. Captain Yuki Sato commanded the new Kyoto as it ambushed a Kethvar supply convoy near the Proxima system. Her crew had adapted to life in deep ocean worlds, giving them reflexes and coordination that worked perfectly in the three-dimensional battlefield of space. "Target their engine cores," she ordered, her blue-tinted hands dancing over holographic controls. "We want their cargo, not their deaths." The human ships moved like living things, flowing around Kethvar defensive fire with a grace that seemed almost organic. 30,000 years of wandering the galaxy had taught humanity how to adapt to any environment, including the deadly emptiness between worlds. Within minutes, the convoy was disabled and surrendering. But instead of destroying the Kethvar ships, Sato did something that confused the enemy crews completely. She let them go. "Take a message back to your commanders," she broadcast to the retreating Kethvar ships. "Tell them that humans don't fight for conquest. We fight for justice. Any Kethvar who lays down their weapons and stops oppressing other species will be allowed to leave in peace." It was a message being repeated across the galaxy as human fleets struck Kethvar military units. Every victory came with the same offer: stop fighting, stop enslaving others, and humans would let them go home. Many Kethvar commanders ignored the offer, but some began to listen. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Chen received a priority. Transmission from deep inside hegemony space. Admiral, this is Agent Rivera on Kethvar Prime itself. Marcus's voice was barely audible through the encrypted channel. I've made contact with the resistance movement here. Even on their homeworld, there are species that want the Empire to end. Chen leaned forward. Marcus Rivera was her most experienced operative, but infiltrating the hegemony's capital world had been considered a suicide mission. What's the situation, Marcus? Better than expected. The ruling class lives in orbital cities while billions of enslaved workers keep the planet running. They've been waiting for someone to give them hope. The entire industrial infrastructure could be shut down from within. How long do you need? 72 hours to coordinate with all the resistance cells. Then we can bring down their entire manufacturing system. Chen made the decision instantly. Do it. We'll make sure you have those 72 hours. She turned to her command staff. Signal all human fleets. Begin Operation Homecoming. Operation Homecoming was the culmination of 30,000 years of planning. Every human ship, every allied species, every freed world would coordinate their attacks to draw Kethvar forces away from their core systems. While the hegemony struggled to contain rebellions across the galaxy, humanity would strike at the heart of their empire. The battle for Kethvar Prime began 18 hours later. Admiral Chen led the combined human fleets directly toward the hegemony's capital system, making no attempt to hide their approach. She wanted High Admiral Vexthar to see them coming. The Kethvar response was everything she had hoped for. Instead of trying to contain the galaxy-wide rebellion, Vexthar pulled his most powerful fleets back to defend the core worlds. It was exactly the kind of arrogant mistake that 30 millennia of easy victories had taught them to make. They think if they destroy us, the rebellion will collapse, Chen explained to her senior staff as they watched Kethvar battle fleets converging on their position. They still don't understand that this isn't about human conquest. It's about galactic freedom. The space around Kethvar Prime became a maelstrom of energy weapons and exploding ships. The human fleets fought with tactics no one in the galaxy had ever seen. Fluid, adaptive, seemingly able to predict their enemies' moves before they made them. But the real victory wasn't happening in space. On the surface of Kethvar Prime, Marcus Rivera stood in the main industrial control center, surrounded by dozens of species that had been enslaved for centuries. Around them, the planet's manufacturing systems were shutting down one by one. The weapon factories are offline, reported Zixtal, an insectoid engineer whose people had been forced to build Kethvar war machines for 1,000 years. Shipyard production has stopped, added Threx, a mammalian technician whose species had maintained Kethvar orbital platforms since before humans had left their homeworld. One by one, the industrial heart of the Kethvar hegemony ground to a halt. Without new ships, new weapons, or new supplies, their military advantage would disappear within months. In the space battle above, Admiral Chen watched as Kethvar resistance suddenly began to crumble. Ships that should have been resupplying started running out of ammunition. Fresh reinforcements stopped arriving. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres called out, we're receiving a transmission from High Admiral Vexthar himself. He wants to discuss terms. Chen smiled grimly. Put him through. The main screen showed the Kethvar commander, his forearms trembling with rage and his compound eyes bright with desperation. Human Admiral, he hissed, you cannot win. Even if you destroy our fleets, you cannot rule the galaxy. You do not have enough ships, enough soldiers, enough administrators to control our territory? You're absolutely right, Chen replied calmly. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to free it. What? Every world that was enslaved by your hegemony will be given back to its original inhabitants. Every species you conquered will be allowed to govern itself. And you... Chen paused, studying the alien commander who had caused so much suffering. You and your people can return to your homeworld and learn how to live without enslaving others. Vexthar's mandibles clicked in confusion. You would let us go? After what we did to your homeworld? Chen thought about Earth, the blue world she had never seen but would always remember. She thought about 12 billion humans who had died, simply because they were inconvenient to someone else's plans. Justice isn't about revenge, she said finally. It's about making sure the crime never happens again. Around them, the battle was winding down as more Kethvar ships accepted human offers of safe passage home. The galaxy-wide rebellion was succeeding beyond all expectations, but the hardest part was still ahead. 5 years after the revolution, Admiral Kestra Chen stood in the memorial garden aboard the Remembrance, tending to plants that had never seen natural sunlight. Each species in the garden came from a different world, some from Earth's genetic banks, others from planets that had been freed from Kethvar rule. The cherry tree beside her had been grown from seeds that Dr. Maria Chen, her ancestor, had smuggled aboard the last evacuation ship from Earth. Its pink blossoms were the first to bloom from actual Earth genetics in 30,000 years. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Chen turned to see Ambassador Sisk Ka approaching through the garden paths. The old Kalani looked different now. His scales had regained their natural golden color, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had helped free his entire species. "Ambassador," Chen replied with a smile, "how are the negotiations going?" "Better than expected. The Vorthak Consortium has agreed to provide full technical specifications for their manufacturing systems. They want to prove they're committed to the new galaxy." It had been a surprise to many when several Kethvar species had actually embraced the revolution. The Vorthak, in particular, had grown tired of their empire's endless wars and had been some of the most enthusiastic supporters of galactic reconstruction. "And the Kalani colonies?" Sisk Ka's eyes brightened. "3 new worlds have been selected for settlement. We'll be able to restore our population to pre-conquest levels within 50 years. My grandchildren will grow up on worlds where they can fly again." Chen nodded, remembering the holographic images Marcus Rivera had shown the enslaved Kalani years ago. The revolution had been about more than just freedom. It had been about giving people back their futures. Admiral Chen to the bridge came Lieutenant Torres's voice over the ship's communication system. "Priority transmission from Earth sector." Chen excused herself and made her way to the command center. The Remembrance was no longer a warship. It had been converted into the headquarters of the Galactic Restoration Project, but it still maintained the bridge where the revolution had been planned. "What is it, Lieutenant?" she asked as she entered. "Message from the Earth Reclamation Team," Torres replied, his face bright with excitement. "They've found something." The main screen lit up with an image that made Chen's breath catch. It showed the asteroid field where Earth had once been, but something was different. In the center of the debris, a massive structure was taking shape, part space station, part monument, part garden. "The new Earth," she whispered. Dr. Sarah Kim's voice came over the communication channel. "Admiral, we've been working with the Stone Singers and Voidwalkers to construct it. The artificial gravity systems are working perfectly, and we've started introducing atmosphere to the first habitation domes. And the garden domes? Fully operational. We're growing food crops from Earth genetics alongside species from every world we've helped liberate. It's going to be beautiful." Chen smiled, thinking about the children aboard the human ships who had never walked on solid ground or breathed natural air. Soon they would have a world of their own, not a replacement for Earth, but a symbol of what could be built when free peoples worked together. "Any word from the outer colonies?" she asked. "Actually, yes. Commander Webb reports that the zero-point energy research is ahead of schedule. The new technology should be ready for distribution within 6 months." That was perhaps the most important development of all. Humans had spent 30,000 years learning from every species they encountered, accumulating knowledge that no single civilization could have developed alone. Now, they were sharing that knowledge freely, giving every world the tools it needed to prosper without conquering others. Clean energy meant that no species would need to strip mine other worlds for resources. Advanced agriculture meant that no one would need to steal fertile planets from their inhabitants. Medical technology meant that species could adapt to harsh environments instead of taking comfortable worlds from others. The Kethvar had built their empire on the idea that the galaxy's resources were limited, and that survival required taking what you needed from those too weak to defend themselves. Humanity was proving that cooperation could create abundance where competition had created only scarcity. "Admiral," Torres said, "we're also receiving status reports from the former hegemony worlds." Chen nodded. This was always the most complex part of the reconstruction. Many worlds had been under HFY rule for so long that they had forgotten how to govern themselves. Others had populations made up of dozens of different species, all trying to figure out how to live together peacefully. Talos 9 reports their first democratic elections will be held next month, Torres continued. The hive builders are working, with the other species there, to design a government that represents everyone fairly. Kepler Station has established a joint council between the residents and the human refugees who helped liberate it. They're planning to convert the asteroid mining facilities into research stations. And the Nomad ships have formed a traveling confederation. They're using their fleet to carry messages and trade goods between systems that don't have hyperspace technology yet. Each success brought its own challenges, but Chen was constantly amazed by how quickly former enemies could become allies when they were no longer fighting over limited resources. The galaxy was learning to be something it had never been before, a community instead of a battleground. Admiral? Dr. Kim's voice came over the communication channel again. There's something else you need to see. We found it in the deepest part of the Earth debris field. The screen changed, showing a small object floating in space. It looked like a metal sphere, no larger than a person's head, but Chen could see that it was covered in writing. It's a time capsule, Dr. Kim explained. Launched from Earth during the evacuation, the message inside is addressed to whoever finds this, whenever that might be. Chen felt tears starting in her eyes. Play it. The sphere opened, and a holographic image appeared, a woman in an Earth Defense Force uniform, standing in what looked like a bunker. Behind her, explosions lit up the sky through broken windows. My name is Dr. Maria Chen, the woman said, and Kestra gasped. It was her ancestor, the woman whose stories had inspired her entire life. If you're watching this, then either humanity survived what's happening to Earth, or someone else found us and decided our story was worth preserving. The hologram flickered as another explosion shook the bunker. I don't know if we'll make it off this planet alive. The HFY ships are everywhere, and the evacuation is behind schedule. But I want whoever finds this to know that we tried. We tried to save everyone. We tried to find another way. Dr. Maria Chen looked directly into the camera, and her words seemed to span 30,000 years. If you're human, then I hope you've found a better home than the one we're losing. If you're not human, then I hope our species can be friends. We made a lot of mistakes on Earth, but we tried to learn from them. We tried to be better. The image began to fade as the time capsule's power failed. Remember us not for how we died, but for how we lived. And remember that even when everything seems hopeless, there's always a chance that tomorrow will be better. The hologram disappeared, leaving the bridge in silence. Chen wiped her eyes and looked around at her crew. They were humans from a dozen different refugee fleets, but also Kalani, Stone Singers, Vorthak, and representatives from species that hadn't even existed when Earth died. Send word to all ships, all stations, all colonies, she said quietly. Tell them that Dr. Maria Chen's message has been received and understood. Tell them that tomorrow did turn out to be better. She turned back to the image of the new Earth taking shape in the ruins of the old one. Around it, ships from hundreds of species worked together, building something that had never existed before, a galaxy where different peoples could live in peace without anyone having to conquer anyone else. And tell them, she added, that Earth's children have finally come home. Outside the ship, the garden of stars stretched to infinity, each light representing a world where beings could now choose their own destiny. The revolution was over, but the work of building a better galaxy had just begun. In the memorial garden, the cherry tree continued to bloom, its flowers carrying the genetic memory of a world that was gone, but not forgotten. And throughout the galaxy, new gardens were being planted on 1,000 worlds, each one a promise that the future would remember the past without being trapped by it. The children of Earth had kept their ancestors' dream alive. Now it was time to help the entire galaxy dream of something even better.